Hey there, everybody. I say everybody, assuming there's somebody. In reality, I'm talking to a camera. I'm going to try this again. I started this video and I was interrupted. And it's funny because I was thinking of, it really reminded me of something I wanted to talk about. Several things, which that's where I should start. Sometimes when I sit down and make a video, I know exactly what I'm going to talk about, what I'm going to say. It just comes out. Other times, I have something really important I want to talk about that I just can't seem to convey the message because it's so vast and wide and it covers so many topics and such a wide spectrum of ideas that there's no way to verbalize it. So sometimes I'll take notes. And I was thinking that what reminded me is after I got interrupted was thinking about my life as a father and how intense I have to be a father of a 3 and 6 year old running around and to get things done and to, get the bills paid, husband and wife working, kids going to school, learning, potty training, all those fun things that we have as parents. And I forget sometimes that I'm a parent, and a lot of folks aren't parents. And I'm not going to say, oh, you just don't understand, but I'm trying to convey the idea that I need to be very focused and intense in my life in certain realms. And it's something that we often overlook. For example, a single person who has a very mellow job that enjoys mellow hobbies, their life may be very relaxing. And in a sense, say a person like that might not find any use for something like, let's say, kratom. Whereas somebody who maybe is in pain would, or somebody who needs energy. Same reason people consume various substances to keep themselves going. And not just substances, but it's behaviors. It's the things we do. A person may say, well, I go out and I exercise every day, and another person feels bad because they don't. And they're like, man, I should get out and exercise more. But they don't realize they're running around, chasing after kids all day and working and taking the bus or whatever they do. Some lives are just filled with stuff, and we just don't have time for all these things we'd like to do. And things we need to do. And of course, that's not an excuse. We make time for those things. But the way our minds go when we're involved in a particular, and this happens and this is something I've noticed. It's like these cycles, these patterns, and this happens to me with there's the life patterns like having kids. That obviously sets a stage for a certain thing. You're responsible. You have to finish this thing. It's a job you started that you can't just throw away halfway through. And there's plenty of shithead dads that do throw it away halfway through, but it's not always that simple. A person thinks that they wanted to have kids, and then they find out later that they can't do it. And that's not an excuse either. I mean, as a parent who loves my children and does everything I can to raise them as well as I can, it disturbs me when I see deadbeat dads. But I also know that person may have set a pattern for themselves that got them into that. And this is really, it's the type of mentality that I really try to carry. It's relativism. I hate putting a title on it, but it really is. I tend to be a relativist, which is basically that your truth is your truth and my truth is my truth. And neither one of us has any way to tell each other that we're wrong. But there's a very interesting thing that somebody brought up that I heard actually. A speaker saying the other day. It was about that. It was about relativism and how relativists may not even argue about something. They would say, well, I like this painter better. And the person would say, I think this painter is better. Now they're not going to get and go gnashing teeth over which painting or which painter is better, but that's because the issue isn't that important. It is subjective. When it comes to an issue like, well, I think racism is good, well, I think it's bad, there may be deeper things in that, and both people may think that they have legitimate claims, but by looking at the reflection of how racism harms society and harms people, one side could say, well, it's totally uncalled for and needs to be abolished. But the other person could say, well, it's also human nature, and judgment is something that we often can't control, and we can't force our brains not to be. And that would maybe be a cop-out on his part. And perhaps it's not the best example. But I think you know what I'm getting at here, which is basically that relativism is okay. to just say, your truth is your truth and my truth is my truth. But when it gets to the point where it's something that's a world issue that's affecting a lot of people, and religion would probably be the best example. A person could say, this was another thing that I heard someone say, it might have been the same speaker. He was saying how they had they did like a play, put on a play with several religious leaders, and they were all supposed to, they weren't really, they were playing the part. And the Buddhist got up there and he said, well, I believe that life is suffering and that, there's a law of karma, and explained Buddhism. And the people said, well, if that's what works for you, then cool. And then the Hindu came up and he started talking about it, what's in his culture, and Shiva and the gods and goddesses. And after he was done, the people said, well, good for you if that works for you. And then the Catholic priest comes up and he tells his story about Christianity and all the different, sorry, not Christianity, I guess, but Catholicism, and the story of the cross and the story of the Bible, whatever, In the end, the people say the same thing. Well, if that works for you, then cool. But he stops him and says, no, it's not if it works for me. It's if it works for all of you. And if you don't believe it, you're going to hell. Now, that's a type of relativism that doesn't work. When a person just says, well, if this person believes what they believe, yet what person believes is harming their outlook on others or themselves. But this isn't obviously a discussion about religion. It's more of a discussion just about viewpoints. But it's more of a ramble, I guess, if anything. Because when I sat down to make this video, I had a subject in mind, but I ended up talking about, this kind of stuff because it's really been on my mind. I have so many different things I think about that I feel like aren't even worth making videos about, but I want to. It's like it needs to come out because I can process these things when I talk about them, even if I'm just talking to a camera. And all of you are awesome. I love my subscribers. A few years back I thought that I was like, man, maybe I should just quit even doing YouTube. And I'd only been at it a year or so, and I said, there's too much negativity, too many harsh people and harsh comments. I stepped back and looked at myself and said, I'm attracting all of this, so what am I doing in my life to attract this negativity? And I started looking at my subscribers, looking at my feed, not looking at my subscribers, but looking at the kind of people that commented and why they'd say harsh things. And I realized it was the subject matter of the video. It may have been something that opposed what they believe in, their belief system, religion. So since then I've been really cautious to not be like, Christians are dumb and wrong. I'm obviously, I don't feel that way. I feel that it's all relative. But there's more complex. It's more complicated than that. But I felt a while back that, there was too much negativity, let's say, on YouTube. And I stepped back and looked at my perception of it, and I said, that's my perception. I went and carefully unsubscribed pretty much all my channels. Anytime a video pops up in my feed that talks about false flags, or has the term New World Order, Illuminati, reptilian, or anything like that, I instantly unsubscribe to whatever channel it is. That may sound shallow, that may sound harsh to somebody that says, hey, maybe there's new evidence out there and they're really trying to talk about it, but to me it's not anything that interests me. I'm done with the conspiracy crap. I'm done with anything having to do with fear, okay? And people say it's not fear, it's awareness. And I say, well, it's fear. It's waking up in the morning and looking, and if a person may know if they go to YouTube every morning and they search for keywords, that's something that could teach you something about yourself. If you're looking for the newest story, because I posted videos about things like reptilians, and I get many more views on those the first day, within an hour, than I do on any other videos. So I made it a point not to, because I'm not about getting views, I'm about getting people that I like. So attracting people who, just merely to attract people with words doesn't work, but it does work, but it works the wrong way. So that was another thing I did with my channel. I completely altered all my different, all my keywords to the channel. I looked and I had like New World Order in there and stuff, and I was into that stuff for a while. It was longer, but honestly now I can say it was during the time when I started YouTube that I was still into this kind of stuff, and I've totally moved out of it. It doesn't mean that I'm not aware of what's going on in the world. It doesn't mean I'm not pissed off that there's, that the system's corrupt. And, that kind of goes with what I was saying about ups and downs and waves and cycles. It's like one day I'm out there and I'm just pissed off thinking, at the cop. I don't really ever get angry, but sometimes I feel definitely emotion about certain things, but I don't let it get the best of me or take my energy if I can't do anything about it. But I catalyze that anger, use it to speak out against things. And there are several subjects such as, the police shootings lately, that I just don't talk about modern issues. And a lot of people who watch my channel have asked, why don't you talk about certain, like, what are your opinions on this or that, like something that's going on in the world. And I'll have to say a lot of the time, honestly, I don't know, because I don't know what's going on in the world as far as the very detailed little things, and the ups and downs. If I don't know all the story, it's hard to talk about it. But, a good example could be these police shootings that have been going on and what happened in Dallas the other day with those cops. It was a very strange thing. And of course, this video will probably be watched, it might be watched down the road in a long time. So, if it's years past, well, there was a shooting the other day during a bunch of people shot cops. And I'm sure that anybody who's watching this, even if it's years down the road, this will probably go down in U.S. history as one of the worst police shootings of police, in U.S. history. A willful attempted assassination of 11 officers or something. Anyway, point is, when I heard about this happening, and this was in retaliation to all the blacks that have been being killed by police, and I really try to keep this in perspective, because I don't want to be biased and just be angry and say police are just all corrupt. But they keep showing us that they will stick together before sticking with the people, and that's bothersome. And that's that's something that that's something that I can't help. But when those cops got shot, on one hand I thought, well, this was coming, But on the other hand, I was pissed at the guys that shot them for shooting officers, just shooting people, anybody. Even a couple bystanders were, hurt, and I just can't see that. There's no acceptable reason for violence. But I understand that when you get to a point in a society where you're being stepped on, your rights are infringed upon, and you feel like you're being wronged, there's really no other way. It's like the farmers who start selling opium because it's their only choice, or cannabis. They don't want to, they don't even do drugs, but they do it because they have to. Or the person that steals, and a person thinks, oh, well, I can't stand a thief. And you find out they're stealing a steak, or not even a steak, but maybe some chicken, or a bag of diapers, or bread, that kind of stuff. People who really need stuff. So there are exceptions to every rule. And there's so many different ways to look at things. And it really is relative, the way that we perceive things. Different cultures. We can't understand what it's like to live in a Muslim country. It's really interesting. I was reading a thing today about other countries, some of the nicest countries to live in. And France, of course, was one of them. And it said that the French are considered some of the happiest people out there and live the most enjoyable lives. Supposedly. This is all subjective, okay? You can't compare. But I read they also have the highest Muslim population of any country by ratio. And I started thinking about how folks are so quick to say that Muslims are the problem, or that it's terrorism, or, the same thing happens with the migrant workers. People want illegals out of the country because they think it's hurting the economy, but really it's providing a source for, many of the fruits and vegetables that we eat. And in the long run, it hurts everybody. So, but this is what I'm saying. It's very relative to what you want from your country or your world. If you want closed borders and you want a country where it's us and them, then that's the direction people like that will take. Those are the people who will vote for Trump. The people who believe that that our nation's wealth and our nation's superiority is somehow more important than worldwide peace. When I see that we'll have to sacrifice a little bit, all of us, to make it a better world. But there's no one driving the boat. There's no consistency. There's no agreement upon which direction we should go with this country or with this world. And I have to kind of sit in the back seat and just ride along. But once in a while, I like to shout out directions, and for what it's worth. Even though it might be a sound block between me and the front. It's like I can't express myself enough to the people who need to hear it, who I feel like are the lawmakers, the people who could change things. the system's so messed up. You know, the whole voting system, the thing with Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton and all this shit that we're fed about who's good and who's bad. Everybody has strong feelings about every subject, and when you step back and just look at it all, you say, what is this, you know? What do people really want? What is the right thing? And honestly, that's probably, I'm glad I brought that up, because it brings me to really the point that when I said I was going to start a video and I had a subject, that's what it was about. Originally, I have this book that I write in. It's notes over the several years since 2000, and it has things about Illuminati's conspiracies, chemtrails, reptilians, whatever, you know, you name it. I was into all of it, but what I wrote down in here was consensus reality, and this has a lot to do with relativism. And so I'll just read a couple notes. I was thinking about making like a series and actually making this because there's so much to talk about, which is why I can't do it in a video. But here are some of the subjects. How is reality affected by scientific discoveries, such as the personal reality that we live? When, well, I can't get into that right now. It just takes so long to go through it. Each person has the ability to see the world in their own way, yet the facts often outweigh the wants and desires. In other words, reality is a party pooper. And that one is a big one I wanted to talk about. This is why science has become the enemy for a lot of people. It's because science tells them what they don't want to hear, that what they may have previously believed may not be true. And then yet others will start using science as a way to prove what they believed by saying, look, quantum physics is proving God exists and all this. Science is nothing more than a method to understand the world. And that science is limited to understanding the world in the senses that we can perceive. Even if we're using instruments that can perceive things that we can't, we still have to perceive those machines. And it gets very complex, but senses are very limited. And so when people tell us, you know, that our gods aren't real, you know, we get upset. That's how humans are. You know, if you put a lot of time into a house and somebody tells you your foundation's bad, you know, you better just kind of cover it up with dirt and ignore it sometimes, because, you know, it'll pull and unravel everything that we believe. That's key. That's what we need to do. We need to be willing to do that every day, is unravel everything we thought we believed. And I still find myself kind of trying to hang on to things that I want to believe. And then I get called out on it by my fellow man, which brings me to the consensus reality, which is why I wanted to do this. Sometimes we think we have it figured out. We think we know as one individual what's true. Truth is very relative, but at the same time, there are certain absolute truths people claim. And anybody who uses truth as a lure, as a video title, that kind of stuff, you know, it becomes so obvious that truth is used often as a controlling mechanism and as an authority mechanism, when it's often not the right authority. So reality is a party pooper in the sense that if we believe something and built this whole foundation and they try to pick it apart, we can find a flaw in the science. Just like science will find a flaw in their studies if they don't agree with their findings. If it doesn't correlate with what they think they're going to find, then often the studies will be done until they get what they want. This is why we don't know truth. We don't know what the real truth is other than what we can feel and see. And that's very limited. One of the examples I wrote down here was a misleading research in medicine, where they use studies that, there was one example where they were studying an enzyme, or it was a antibiotic or something that, it wasn't an antibiotic, no, it was whatever it was. It was binding to another, and they thought they spent like a year and like millions of dollars on the research and find out that they were studying the wrong compound. But they were giving it to all these people, and you know, it's very difficult. We're doing our best. We can't blame science as a whole, because it's a great method. It's just very limited, because our hearts, you know, tell us things that science can't prove. And I just wrote a couple more things down. One of my favorite sayings is, you know what they say. And that's a really funny one. That is kind of a consensus reality thing. Who are they? You know, what do they say? What are they saying? You know, and why are they an authority at all? And this last one was funny. Science has its dark age too. You know, it really did. You know, there were times when we were, you know, giving people very interesting compounds that we thought were, you know, things that worked for illnesses, and find out that that wasn't the cause. Or certain medical procedures which may sound, you know, crazy now, but it was the best we had. And then the future we'll look back on now and we'll feel the same way. So I'll leave the rest of them for another time, because I think it'll be an interesting series. I really want to get deep into it, because I got to do a lot of research to bring these things to the table, because I think it's important that we realize that I'm looking through my eyes, you're looking through your eyes. That's the best we have. We can follow our hearts, but our hearts are swayed by what we think we know. Our hearts are swayed by our perceptions of what's good and bad, of what is evil. And we have to admit to ourselves and to each other that we are weak, deep down inside, and that that's just a natural thing. It's a natural order of life. By knowing we're weak and admitting that, we become stronger. Instead of picking at each other's shells and flaws, we can shake hands, you know, and stop holding grudges, and slowly creep out of what may be the downfall of mankind coming up here if we don't get our shit together. However, I still refuse to buy into worrying about you know, the collapse of the world, the economy, asteroid, Nibiru, global warming, you name it. Whatever's going to happen is going to happen, and we have to live our lives. And that's really the best we can do. And I realized when I was younger, the reason why I was so into these things is because I didn't really know what direction I wanted out of my life. You know, people who are comfortable and stable and happy often aren't into conspiracies merely because it pulls them away from their happiness. But when you're already unhappy in some ways, it's easy to get wrapped up in all that stuff. And I'm not saying that that's everybody's case out there, but that was my case. I didn't know what I wanted out of life. I didn't go to college. I didn't have an education or a good job. I didn't have any money, and I had nothing to do. Then I met my wife, and we got, you know, we have kids. We're happy, and as long as my life's going well, then I don't tend to dwell on the negative. And I think that we could all agree that that's kind of how we all operate. When things are good, they're good, and when they're not, they're not. So realizing that somebody else might be having a bad time right now, and to give each other a little bit of slack, a little respect. Just a message of peace and love and all that jazz. Peace out, everybody.